Hey everyone, welcome back to your classroom. It's the Functional Retirement Podcast. I'm your host, Thatcher Taylor, Certified Financial Planner. And today we're diving into a question that's going to be way more complex than it sounds. But don't blame it on me. This is your fault. This is your fault. You all are making this question more complex than it needs to be. And the reason for that is because you're going to have trouble deciding which version of retirement is best for you. Because it turns out there's not just one version of retirement. The traditional retirement of stopping work at a predetermined time and sailing into the sunset, that has now become one of many paths that people talk about or envision for their retirement. So today, I'm walking you through 6 very real but very different types of retirement and why the steps that you take, your retirement plan, needs to match up with the version that you really want. And that's the most value that a financial advisor like me can add, is you have a retirement vision, but for some reason you think that vision is too difficult or unattainable. My job is to help you make decisions that keep you on the path towards your retirement. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Please make sure, if you're watching this on YouTube, to like and subscribe. The growth has been amazing. I appreciate it. Comment which retirement you want. You don't have to dive in deep, but I want you to comment below which retirement you want. And if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple or wherever, you can leave comments there, but you can also shoot me an email if you would like to let me know which retirement you want if you need help with it. Okay, let's start with the easiest version. The most common one, the traditional retirement. This is the classic version. This is the cheese pizza. You work until 65 or later, give or take. You file for Social Security. You tap your 401k and your pensions if you have one, but most of you don't have one. And you step fully away from work. Sail off into the sunset. It's what most people are familiar with. It's structured. It's common. People are comfortable with it. And it still works. In fact, there are clients that I'm working with now that are planning for that type of retirement. But that plan also makes some assumptions. The traditional retirement, the cheese pizza, having enough saved, having employer-sponsored healthcare or government healthcare like Medicare, and wanting to fully stop working is sometimes a really complex task, especially with this current environment that we live in. So for many people, they're trying to shift that dream. But if you're still in the traditional retirement dream, here's what you need to have. You need to have enough. You need to have accumulated enough, usually depending on your lifestyle. I mean, I've seen people retire with $500,000, but I know some people that are going to need $3 to $4 million. So you need to make sure you have enough saved based on your lifestyle, how long you're going to live, any additional goals in retirement. You need to have health care, which is usually Medicare. If you're not working, the income is going to need to come from Social Security, pensions, and the amount that you have saved. This is a fine strategy, but if you're going to use this, there are some additional concerns that you need to be worried about. One of which is required minimum distributions. If you've worked for 30 or 35 years, you've probably accumulated an IRA, a 401k that's most likely going to be an IRA, and the IRS is going to make you withdraw money. This could lead you to incurring taxes and big distributions from your retirement accounts. That's one thing you're going to need to be concerned about. Second is longevity risk, the risk of outliving your money, which would mean you're over distributing from those savings or assets that I mentioned before, which leads to you depleting your asset base far enough where you don't have enough later in life. These are just a couple technical elements that you need to be aware of. One last thing I should add is at the end of life healthcare that's not covered by traditional Medicare, things like in-home care, rest home care, assisted living, you either need to have a policy to cover those or you need to come out of pocket. So make sure to plan for those if you're using the traditional retirement. Again, traditional retirement works. It's the first option, but it's not the only option. The next option has become more popular lately, but does not come without its own concerns. This is the FIRE movement. That's early retirement, financial independence, retire early movement. You're retiring in your 40s or your 50s by saving aggressively, which you will have to. You don't get to retire early if you're not saving aggressively. Sometimes up to 50%, maybe 60% of your income, which is a lot. And you got to live real lean. And even in retirement, you might have to live real lean unless you made a ton of money. But it requires extreme discipline, long-term planning, and real long-term planning, and usually a really strong investment strategy because you need your assets to grow. But here's the catch. You need to plan very carefully for things like healthcare. Because if you retire early, you're not at Medicare age at 65. So you have to handle paying for your healthcare, which leads into sequence of returns risk. What if there's a bad decade of market returns when you need big piles of money? So you need to make sure you structure your withdrawal strategy to last as long as you need it. The next thing is if you have big retirement accounts, like say you were employed and you do have a 401k and there are some IRA dollars that you're going to need to access later, you can't access them till age 59 and a half. There are some random rules like the rule of 55 that you could utilize, but still, if you're trying to retire early, you're not going to be able to access a lot of funds without taxation and or penalty for a lot of years. So early retirees, and I mean real early retirees, face the challenge of bridging those income gaps because you're not working, you're retired. And I know you're going to say, well, you're not fully retired, you're just getting to do what you love. Well, I'm going to get to that. But a lot of people want to just retire and live the life they want, and they want to do it early. So some add-ons, some things you need to be aware of are the IRAs, your age, your Medicare, how you're invested, and how much you're distributing from your assets to meet this early retirement need, even though you could be living longer. Remember, this day and age, people living longer into their 90s is not an unreasonable expectation. So you're trying to retire early, you better be careful. All right, the next version of retirement, which is probably what a lot of FIRE people, financial independence, retire early people want to do, is a semi-retirement. But even outside of the retirement, the early retirees, maybe there is a partial retirement for people that had the traditional retirement mentality, but not completely have the traditional retirement mentality. So it's people who want a little bit more freedom. Maybe they enjoy working or they have a skill set or a passion that they're able to turn into income, but they want more flexibility. They want more control. They don't want the steady grind. They want a little variability in how they navigate through retirement. Things that may happen are you potentially going part-time work, starting a consulting business, picking up some freelance work or seasonal work, where you're partially retired, where maybe you've worked the majority of your career in a consistent income building or income producing employment. And now you don't want that consistency where you want to retire from the main grind and you want to move to something a little bit more flexible. Still gives you structure, gives you a little bit of income, and most importantly, it gives you some purpose. Without the grind of a full-time job, you now have a little bit of flexibility to navigate, and you probably accumulated assets along the way. In some cases, semi-retirement is maybe you've accumulated some assets, but not enough. And so you kind of have to work. Maybe that's your retirement plan requires a little bit extra work to bridge some income. Maybe not though. Maybe you just want to work to work. but it can significantly either way reduce the pressure on your savings, especially in the early years of retirement. So, some technical add ons to this is you need to navigate things like taxes. You creating more income could create big tax bills in retirement. That doesn't mean you're going to completely be able to avoid taxes with some strategies. You just need to be prepared for what the tax bills are. Just try to avoid the taxation as much as possible. In addition, you can do things like defer Social Security, which would maximize or grow your benefit. You can delay tapping your tax deferred accounts, which let them accumulate and grow and maximize the tax deferral. You can even do Roth conversions in lower income years. So although you're in a semi partially working environment, you're not having the same amount of income that you had when you're in your maximum earning years. So maybe you can use some Roth conversions to move pre-tax dollars into tax-free dollars. So it could be a great opportunity for that as well. But do know in the semi-retirement world, you really need to navigate your income, how much your assets you're going to use, and how long you're going to be working. Do you want to work for the rest of your life in a semi-work situation, or do you just want to do it for maybe a couple of years, somewhat of a bridge? But either way, that's a version of retirement that I've been hearing a lot more from people where I don't know if I'm going to completely retire. I just kind of want to change from this career that I've had to maybe something I enjoy a little bit more. So that's the third version of retirement. All right, number 4 is the career shift retirement. This version is about retiring from something, but not from work entirely and starting something else. In the career shift world, you think a lot about the public servants, the public sector or military, where they have a career in the military or they're firefighters or police officers. They retire and then they shift to something else. But you could also have a short stint in a corporate job. Maybe you work from 25 to 55, 30 years and you want to shift. There's a variety of scenarios, but maybe you want to pivot where you pivot from one career to another. And this is different from the semi retirement version that we just spoke about in number 3, where semi retirement is you're retired, where you spend a lot of your time working to very little of your time working in comparison. Where the career shift retirement could be an early retirement to another career in something else where you're not really reducing a lot of your time. You could be teaching, coaching, starting a business around something you love, taking a different role with more meaning and less stress. It could be a variety of different things, but you're not stopping working. I have a client right now who shifted from a big, long career in the corporate world to more of a privatized business venture where they're still spending a lot of time, but the retirement is still working and going on a business venture. Cash flow can be different in these types of scenarios. Depending on what the second career is, you could be going from something very consistent to something very volatile. Say it's consulting or commission based, or it's a business that you run on your own, or it can be a different company with consistent income as well. Either way, you need to navigate your tax situation and you need to navigate the investment options. If you're not utilizing the investments that you have for income, like some of the other retirement options we just spoke of, you will be needing less of them. So you need to make sure they're invested the right way based on your goals and time. For example, if you're going to retire 55 and start a new career for another 10 or 15 years, you don't need your assets. So you need to make sure they're invested for long-term growth. You're still getting appreciation. This is a really unique version, but I do see often. In fact, I have some clients going through it right now. All right, number 5, this is my favorite version. This version is the one that I wish everyone could fall into, where I call it the work optional retirement. The work optional retirement is basically you've saved enough, you've invested well, you've had enough income, and you reach a point where you don't need to work, but you can if you want to, if you want to stay busy. The work optional retirement is my favorite one. It's usually reserved for people that really grind, but are still grinders, that they don't want to work the way that they've been working. And they maybe want to take a break for a few years and then they maybe stumble into something and then they can try that and I don't like it. But either way, it's pure financial independence where it gives you control over your life. And that's what true retirement is how do you want to control all of this? You want to work a little bit? Great. If you don't, great. You want to take 5 years off? Great. You want to live overseas? Great. It's not about quitting. The work optional isn't about completely quitting. It's about being flexible, having that freedom. A couple things that you really want to evaluate is again taxes, but utilizing the right investment accounts to support this. This is going to take planning because what if there is a year where you generate income and you over distributed from your retirement accounts when you didn't need to? It could lead you to a big tax bill. But also, what if you under distributed from your retirement accounts and you thought you were going to do something, but you didn't? And so now you're just a little bit light on what you need based on your income distribution strategy. You need to really navigate this because some big decisions happen down the road. Medicare, Social Security. So this isn't a set it and forget it. You do have the freedom, you do have the control, but there are some big financial decisions that happen along the way that you really need to navigate. And this is the one, number 6, that I've been hearing the most of, that I'm struggling to wrap my head around. But it's what I've been hearing seriously in the past 3 weeks. I've probably heard this 5 times where people are like, I'm never going to retire. I'm never going to retire. Some people just love what they do and they're never going to retire. They're healthy, they're engaged, they find purpose in their work. So instead of stopping, they just keep going. They don't think of retirement as a place to kind of shift into boredom and doing nothing. One particular client said they don't really have any hobbies or anything to fill up the time and they enjoy what they're doing. There's no reason for them to change. So they're going to stay active in the workforce as long as they can. This version does require planning because if you're working into your 70s, you could have RMDs, you could have Social Security, Medicare, any other expenses affiliated with your career or business. You really need to navigate the impacts of all that extra income. And by that point in time, you could be in your maximum earning years. So don't avoid the planning if you're never going to retire. Because again, your assets are still going to be there. And if you're still working and you're not utilizing any of your assets, you're accumulating a large pot of money that you even need to plan for who it's going to go to. How's it going to go to your heirs? How do you want it to go to your heirs? But this has become more common. People just don't want to stop working. That's the transition. And this is a personal experience thing. This could be they saw their parents retire and they saw their parents hate retirement because in retirement, people could get anxious, depressed, unhealthy. So people, the next generation see that and they're like, oh man, I'm never stopping retirement. They think it's a horror story. They think it's a death sentence. But some people are just workaholics and they just want to keep working. It's the only thing they know how to do. So a lot of this is mental, it's behavioral, it's experiential. That's fine. Just make sure that this is the retirement that you want, that you really want. If it's not the retirement you really want, you can implement steps to help protect you to make sure you're having the retirement that you want so you don't have to work the whole time. So, which version fits you? Which one are you planning for? Which one do you want? Here's the mistake I see. People save and invest or don't save and invest. You can see how some of these, a saving and investing or don't save and invest, could impact one of them or the other. People save and invest or don't save and invest, and they don't do it with asking what kind of retirement they actually want. For example, people will say they're going to work until the day they die. So they think they'll always have income. So they don't invest or save enough now. And then they change their mind. It's not the actual retirement that they want, and it's too late. Or people are wanting to retire early. They want a traditional retirement, but they're not saving and investing enough. And vice versa. You're saving way too much. You're investing way too much for a retirement version that doesn't need that much investing or saving, which in general, you can never oversave and overinvest. When you finally start to define your version of retirement, you can build a plan that actually supports it. financially, emotionally, logistically, comfortably. And if you're not sure what version is right for you, whether your plan supports it, that's what I'm here for. Go to propathfinancial.com if you want to reach out to me. You're going to hit the link below. It's going to be in the show notes or the comments, and we can figure it out together. That's what I do first is I help figure out, what does retirement look like? What do you want? What was your parents' retirement like? Hopefully this helps you understand that retirement looks a lot different for everyone. It's not the exact same thing. And you need to start taking time and feeling confident enough to implement steps to get the retirement version you want. And none of these are the wrong answer. I know I said I have one that's my favorite, but none of them are the wrong answer. Just make sure you're doing the things that support the one that you want. Thanks for watching. See you next week.